the 5th chapter of the Picture of Dorian Gray, and we'll see in this chapter that it's quite interesting because Dorian and Lord Henry, who have been dominating the novel up until this point, are absent in this chapter. But really, chapter 5 is going to introduce and describe the Vane family characters. And of course, you can make a comment on the fact that their surname is Vane, although spelled differently. But anyway, and it really sets up the events that will be developed a little bit later on in the story. So we start off page 71, where it's all about now Sybil telling her mom and her brother about this man that she's met, and how much in love she is with him and all that. Mrs. Vane says, "You must not think of anything but your acting, because we're very, very poor. Right? We're very poor. You need to act. You need to make money, because Mr. Isaacs, who is like the theatre manager, he's been very good to us, so we owe him money." Okay. Sybil Vane says, "Well, Prince Charming rules life for us now." And it's very important, I've put that in pink, that she knows Dorian as Prince Charming, and the family will only know Dorian as Prince Charming. And she's so infatuated and in love with Dorian that she says, well, he rules our life now, he's everything. Unfortunately, the events that follow mean that he actually kind of does rule their lives from that moment onwards. But anyway, coming back to that a little later. Page 72, this young man might be rich, if so marriage should be thought of. So Mrs. Vane sort of changes her attitude a little bit when she thinks to herself, okay, well, you should focus on your acting, Sybil, but at the same time, if this man is rich, well, then maybe you should get married to him, and then we won't be so poor anymore. We could benefit. Mrs. Vane says on page 73, "My child, you are far too young to think of falling in love. Besides, what do you know of this young man? You don't even know his name," which she is correct. All right. James Vane, who's 16 years old, and Sybil is 17 years old. James Vane is going to be a sailor. He's going to go to Australia. And the mom was a little bit annoyed with Sybil that, Sybil, you're focusing on yourself and this man when we should be really sending off your brother and saying goodbye and all that. James Vane says, "I don't suppose I shall ever see this horrid London again." And he doesn't like where he's staying. He doesn't like the circumstances. We kind of get a little bit of a cynical view out of him, attitude. I've put there, unfortunately you will, because we'll find out that James will definitely be back and will stick around for many, many years for a particular reason. Page 75, James says, "All I say is to his mother, watch over Sybil. Don't let her come to any harm." Because now he's going to Australia and he's worried about Sybil. His insight into his mother's inability to look after Sybil is quite accurate, because the mother doesn't look after Sybil. He says, "I hear a gentleman comes every night to the theatre and goes behind to talk to her," that being Dorian, of course. Mrs. Vane says, "The young man in question is a perfect gentleman." Well, no, he's not, because even at this relatively early stage in the novel, we know that Dorian is not actually really a perfect gentleman, is he? James says, "You don't even know his name." So that's reiterated again. James may be a year younger, but he has more maturity and insight into saying, how can you be in love with this guy and have him come talk to you every night and you don't even know his name? And then he again warns his mother, watch over Sybil, watch over her. Page 77, he was a gentleman and he hated him for that. James says, Dorian Gray is a gentleman supposedly, and he hates him for that. So James hates the fact that he's a gentleman. And we discover that it's because James's father was a gentleman and left them, the family, didn't even marry the mother. Excuse me. And so he hates his father for that, and so therefore hates Dorian as well. Also on page 77, James was conscious also of the shallowness and vanity of his mother's nature, and in that saw infinite peril for Sybil and Sybil's happiness. Yes, there is definite peril coming on its way for Sybil and Sybil's happiness, because she dies. She commits suicide. She's so unhappy. James says, "You have a new friend," to Sybil. Who is he? Wants to find out who this guy is. And he immediately says to his sister, he means you no good. He's correct, you know. Why, you don't even know his name. The third time now. All right? And it's a pity that James doesn't know his name. Sybil says he is called Prince Charming, and that shows how innocent, childlike, naive she is. That she could be in love with somebody and only refer to him as Prince Charming. It's almost as if she's living in a dream world or in one of the plays in which she acts. Like it's all make-believe. Page 79, James says, he wants to enslave you, this guy. I want you to be aware of him. Good advice. Unfortunately, Sybil doesn't listen. Page 80, Sybil says, he is gone. I wish you had seen him. Okay, so what happens is that Sybil and James, they leave the house, they go for a walk, right? They go for a walk down this street, Euston Road, dreary street, right? And they're walking down there having a conversation, and then suddenly Sybil sees a carriage go past, and Dorian is in the carriage, and just before James is able to turn around in time and have a look, the carriage disappears, and James never actually sees Dorian's face. So he's got no idea what this guy looks like, which again is a pity, because it would have helped James a great deal a little bit later. Anyway, James says, well, I wish I had seen him. We wish you had too. For as sure as there is a God in heaven, if he ever does you any wrong, I shall kill him. That's foreshadowing in a sense. Not so much because it comes true, but because of the promise that he makes. Right? Also on page 80, James says, I am 16 and I know what I'm about. I know what I'm talking about. So he's a lot more mature than Sybil. And he's saying, mother is no help to you. He has that knowledge. He can see that, which is true. I wish now that I was not going to Australia at all. Yeah, it's a pity you actually didn't stay. Page 82, James says, mother, I have something to ask you. Tell me the truth. I have a right to know. Were you married to my father? And that's where there's a bit of animosity between him and his mother, and doubting his mother's ability to look after Sybil. That sort of sits there where the mother admits that no, they weren't married. And of course the irony of it all is that Sybil doesn't actually marry Dorian either, and well, it turns out badly for Sybil. Page 83, James says, believe me that if this man, this Prince Charming, wrongs my sister, I will find out who he is, track him down, that's foreshadowing, because James does do that, and kill him like a dog. Well, we'll have to see whether that comes true or not. I swear it. Right. So that is reiterated a number of times by Oscar Wilde to show us that James is very hell-bent, or will be very hell-bent, on getting revenge against Dorian should something bad happen to Sybil. And well, if you've read the next chapter, you'll know that something bad does in fact happen to Sybil. She kills herself, right? So we know that after we've read that Sybil kills herself and is dead, we must not forget about James Vane. He will be back. Page 83, right at the bottom, of the threat that James makes, Mrs. Vane said nothing. It was vividly and dramatically expressed. You know, James is just being overly dramatic. She felt that they would all laugh at it someday. No, they definitely will not be laughing at it at all. Okay? Trust me on this one. And that ends chapter 5.